Hello, and welcome to the pre-concert talk for the concert by Singapore Symphony Orchestra. The pieces featured in this concert are Sonata for Violin, Percussion, and String Orchestra, opus 134 by Shostakovich, and Souvenir de Florence, opus 70 by Tchaikovsky. For those who like to look for connections, yes, these are both pieces composed late in the careers of these Russian masters. However, they have also been both rearranged and will be performed with new instrumentation. Let me start by discussing the Sonata for Violin, Percussion, and String Orchestra. This piece was originally a sonata composed for violin and piano. There is an interesting story connected to it, as told by David Oistrakh, the Russian violin virtuoso, that Shostakovich wanted to compose a violin concerto for Oistrakh's 60th birthday, but got the year mixed up and completed that concerto in 1967, when Oistrakh was only 59 years old. Hence, he composed the violin sonata the following year to make it up to his good friend. This sonata has 3 movements. Movement 1 is marked andante and begins with an interesting ostinato-type accompaniment, repeating a tone roll-like melodic line, against which the violin makes dark and foreboding melodic statements. Movement 2 is marked allegretto and is in a sonata form with 2 main themes that interplay and get developed on a musical canvas that is rhythmically aggressive and may sound slightly violent to unwary listeners. Movement 3 is a passacaglia with an introduction. The bass line of the passacaglia maintains its energy throughout repeated statements. The violin will signal the end of the piece with an improvisation-like section, followed by a return of the introductory material played by the accompanist. At the conclusion, the thematic material from Movement 1 also returns to give the listener a sense of completing a journey. So far, I have described the violin sonata in its original form, that is, violin and piano accompanist, or really more like a piano collaborator in this case. If you already know this version, then the version for percussion and string orchestra would be an interesting experience. In 2005, the chamber group called Camerata Baltica, consisting of young musicians, including violinist Gidon Kremer, who was also a student of David Oistrakh, released a well-known recording of the Sonata for Violin, Percussion, and String Orchestra, with orchestration credit going to a gentleman named Mikhail Zinman, Mikhail with a C. In my research, I have discovered that Mr. Zinman had arranged several pieces for the Camerata Baltica, and I surmise that the impetus for this reorchestration came from Gidon Kremer. Please enjoy this very interesting arrangement. Next on the program, we have Tchaikovsky's Souvenir de Florence, opus 70. This 4-movement work was originally composed for a string sextet comprising 2 violins, 2 violas, and 2 cellos. The story goes that Tchaikovsky received an honorary membership to a chamber music society in Russia in 1886. Along with this honor, the society's founder, Eugene Albrecht, was also planning a concert featuring Tchaikovsky's chamber works. Being pleased about this news, the composer promised to deliver a chamber work dedicated to Albrecht's music society, and in 1887, as a challenge to himself, Tchaikovsky decided it should be a sextet as described above. However, this proved to be incredibly challenging to the composer, and he often bemoaned the monumental task in his diary entries and in letters to friends and family. So, what was the nature of the challenge? In 1887, Tchaikovsky had begun with grand plans of creating the piece with independent, singular, yet homogeneous voices from each line, but found that he often just ended up with the typical scheme of soloist and accompanist. Several years went by without a word mentioned about this piece until 1890, when he began discussing it with friends and writing about it in his diary again. Mostly, his mood seemed to be one of despair and dread, and he even mentioned that he felt as if he had lost his power of musical composition. Sometime in here, he took a trip to Tuscany for a couple of months to visit the city of Florence, and this is how the piece received its title. Various accounts have described his experiences in Florence in contrasting ways. No one seems to be sure whether he found solace and inspiration, or was not at all moved by that city. It is clear at least that he had an enjoyable time visiting art galleries and historic sites. He completed the piece, but was still rather insecure about its musicality, even at the first public performance of it. He mentioned in correspondence with Albrecht that the musicians should feel free to give feedback about how he could improve various passages or change bowings in order to make everything work out better. In any case, Tchaikovsky did rework and re-edit the piece, and the final version appeared in 1892. The four movements of this piece are as follows. Movement 1, Allegro con spirito, is in a sonata form and features a forceful first theme in D minor. Meanwhile, the second theme is in the contrasting A major. Movement 2, Adagio cantabile, e con moto, has a lyrical theme played by the violins with pizzicato accompaniment. And later, the cellos take over with their own rendition of this theme. Movement 3, Allegretto moderato, and Movement 4, Allegro vivace, seem more Russian in flavor than Italian, with folk song overtones, and can be quite rhythmically driven at times. Now, what you just heard was the original string sextet version. The string orchestra arrangement you'll be listening to is by Lucas Drew. He is a renowned bass teacher and orchestra member based in Florida in the USA. His arrangement was published in 1993. Thank you for listening to my pre-concert talk, and I hope you have a wonderful time being entertained by your Singapore Symphony Orchestra.